Hello everyone, this is WV3 video on the lawgiver. PowerPoint will be available as well as this video for the lesson to fill out notes. This is kind of a summarized variety, but first thing I'm going to ask you to do is question who made it. And then write down as many who made it and go back as far as you can go. So for example, the chair. The chair was made by a factory in IKEA, which was made by the owner of IKEA, who was made by his parents, his grandparents, etc. And see how far back you can go. Most people can get to about 6-7 steps unless they start going and his parents 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 and just rattling it on and on and on. So if you think about the alphabet, you're starting at Z, you go to Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, O, N, M, L, K, J, I, H, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. What comes before A? When you keep going back, eventually you reach a point where you can't go back any further. And the question is, well, what comes before that? This is a question that's similar to who made God. Now, when we take a look at going back in time, the Big Bang is a scientific theory. Now, a theory, again, remember, is different than a law because it is an explanation. And science, dealing with the natural, means it's a scientific explanation. Now, this has often been conflated with atheism, and we're going to take a look at that. But the Big Bang really simply says at the beginning there was a start to all space and time. In fact, the beginning of all time and all matter. The universe has a beginning, and so did all of time. And that is essentially what the Big Bang says, and then tries to explain what happened oh so long ago. Now, the premise of the Big Bang Theory is that it's an effort to explain what happened at the very beginning of our universe. Prior to the moment when the universe began, there was absolutely nothing. Most people picture it as a big empty black void, but the thing is that there was no black. There was no void. There was no space. There was no empty space to put something in. And the Big Bang Theory explains what happened during and after that moment when the nothing became something. First of all, the Big Bang is not actually an explosion because that would indicate the fact that there was sound. But there wasn't sound. Rather, it's just a continual expansion. It's not a little fireball appearing in space, again, because there was no space. There was no time, no energy, no matter. So you can't have a little fireball appearing in space that somehow then expanded. Right? This is the beginning of space as well as the beginning of the universe. Taking a look at the idea of the anthropic principle, which is really just a question saying that the universe itself is just absolutely right for life. The emergence of humans and human civilization requires many physical constants, laws, and properties that fall within a very, very tiny range. This range is ever so small, ever so tiny, and we see it constantly throughout the universe. Things such as gravitational constant, the charge on an electron, Planck's constant, and the speed of light. If that gravitational constant were just a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, life in the universe could not exist as we know it. If the charge in an electron were ever so slightly more or less than what it is, life could not exist. If the speed of light were just a little bit faster or a little bit slower, the universe would be an absolute nothing. These things are absolutely constant, and it seems as if these things are so finely tuned to produce life. Now, the first identified constant was the ratio of the gravitational force to the electromagnetic force. If it differed from its value from 1 part in 10,000 trillion trillion trillion, we wouldn't have life. Everything would be gone. Now, that, if you want to think about it as percentage, well, that's like 0.00000, like put in like 40 zeros, then 1%. 0.0000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000 in its exact values for us to have life. Since then, we've discovered over 38 such constants and ratios that are so finely tuned that if it were off by even just this amount, that life could not exist. So, if you start to think about why is it not by chance, well, chance is a random selection of possibilities. Thing is that at the Big Bang there was no possibilities, so you can't have a selection of them. Chance says, well, if I've got these different things and I try to draw and from which one, well, one will come in. Think of it this way. Chance would be if I've got a bag full of marbles, what are the chances that I pick the red one? Well, what happens if that bag has no marbles in it? What are the chances? Well, there is none. You can't dip into a bag of no marbles and pull out a marble. If something from nothing requires a designer to bring it about in the first place. Think of it this way. Chance would be like the probability, the chance, would be like a tornado going through a junkyard and making a fully functioning Boeing 747 airplane. But then, going through a junkyard, there's no pieces in the junkyard to start, and the tornado goes through and happen in the form of Boeing 747 airplane. The idea of this happening, where we have it without happening, very remote. It's even more remote if you don't even have the pieces in the junkyard in the first place. And the Big Bang is that nothing coming from something. So when we take a look at what are some of the conclusions of this, everything in space and time is subject to causality. It has something which began it. C comes after B. B comes after A. But eventually you get to a point where, well, what started A? But this is again within the definition of the timeline. When you take a look at that analogy of C comes after B, B comes after A, well, what comes before A? Well, the thing is the author of the alphabet. Right? Everything within space-time has a beginning, and the beginning has to be outside the definition of time. The universe needs a cause outside of itself. Therefore, there is no time or cause that can be placed on God within our understanding of these concepts. So just to summarize, try to get this video started.
Who created God? Many atheists, such as Richard Dawkins, have advanced what seems to be a valid objection to belief in God. They say that belief that this universe was designed by a creator because it is complex can equally be used as an argument against God too. After much thinking and rigorous discussion, some atheists have advanced what they believe to be an invincible argument. That is, that if the universe's complexity requires a designer, then surely God, who is more complex, must need something that designed him too. This argument is, however, flawed on several levels. No, I didn't mean that kind of flawed. I meant this kind of flawed. Let's take each flaw one by one. Firstly, the assumption of this argument is wrong. The universe does not require a designer simply because it is complex. The main reason the universe requires a designer is because before the Big Bang, the universe didn't exist. There was nothing. Zero. Zilch. Nada. And then it came into existence. And there was life, and babies, and happy loving couples, and plants, and indeed the entire solar system, Christmas decorations, and of course our favorite cheesecake. Something came from nothing. And this process requires a designer. This process cannot happen by chance. Why is this? Simply put, this is because the definition of chance is the random selection of an outcome from a set of possibilities. When, however, there are no possibilities, because nothing yet exists, then how can there be a selection of them? Thus, the only possible origin of anything is design, not chance. Think of it like this. Random chance cannot create a car from parts that do not yet exist. Those parts have to exist first. You need an engine and an exhaust, tires and a body all separately before you put them together. On the other hand, how many car manufacturers do you need to produce a car that already exists? None. Similarly, because the universe didn't exist prior to the Big Bang, it requires a designer. Because chance cannot choose from options that don't exist. As God has indeed always existed, God therefore doesn't need a designer. Is this claim that God has always existed and is in other words eternal far-fetched? Does it make sense that anything can be eternal? When we examine this, we find that the existence of an eternal creator is not only necessary, but it is in actual fact the only solution. Take, for example, your own existence. Many years ago, depending on how many grey hairs you had, you were a baby. There was you and your mum. Before you and your mum were your grandparents, who hopefully are still with us today. Before your grandparents, there were many generations of people, your ancestors. And before humans and animals, there was the planet. And before the planet and the solar system, there was the galaxy. Though scientists would have us believe it doesn't quite look like this, but rather a little more like this. The Milky Way galaxy. And what existed before the Milky Way galaxy? Well, there were nebulae, gaseous clouds from which stars were formed. And before all that was the Big Bang. An explosion in which everything came from nothing. And what preceded the Big Bang? Let's call it the Big Cause. Well, what was before the Big Cause? Well, let's call it the bigger cause. And what caused the bigger cause? Ultimately, this chain of cause and effect cannot extend into the past infinitely. The reason for this is simple. Everything that begins to exist must have a cause, because something cannot create itself. To create itself, it would need to both exist and not exist at the same time. And yet, if we keep going back infinitely, that makes the chain of cause and effect infinite, like a line of dominoes that has no beginning, but stretches into the past forever. If, however, the line of dominoes has no beginning, then how did we get to the present moment? For example, if there was no beginning to this video, then how did you get to the middle of it? If there is no beginning to a race, then how do you find yourself running in it? A line of cause and effect that stretches infinitely into the past can never reach any point along its chain. What this shows us is that we need something to have been an uncaused cause. To believe in an uncaused cause is necessary to believe in everything else that has a beginning and was caused. And thus we are left with three options. Firstly, believe in an uncaused cause. Secondly, believe that nothing, including yourself, has a beginning. And finally, disbelieve in everything that exists. I know which one makes the most sense to me. The only question that remains, therefore, is whether this uncaused cause is conscious or not. However, if you really want to know if the uncaused cause is conscious, there is a really easy way to find out. All you need to do is lift up your hands and pray. Ask the uncaused cause to communicate with you. If the uncaused cause created everything, then ask it if it calls itself God.
Yeah, I know that it is actually not a Christian video, but it makes the point. So what about the atheists? Well, first of all, it's important for us to acknowledge the fact that atheists are also trying to make sense of the world. And their worldview actually has no room for the supernatural being in any form. But if we take a Christian perspective, we have to remember that they are also created in the image of God too. And we can't ignore this fact. So we've got a scientific law activity. We're going to make a 3-minute short presentation about it. And you'll look at the assignment specifically in your unit book. If you do have any questions, let me know.